Fine. Don't break that.
Yeah, I won't mess with it. Okay. Okay. I'd like to call the Town of Fraser Board meeting to order at 6 p.m., 6:01 p.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
Adam Quickman,
Peggy Smith, Julie White,
Louis Gregory.
Katie Souls.
And Brian Cirkvenik. Could I entertain a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Right. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the minutes from August 21st, 2024. There is an addition under updates, number 6, Trustee Souls bottle bill statewide that would place a 20-cent deposit on all single serving beverage bottles and cans, as opposed to what it said in the packet.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We'll move on to open forum. This is for business not on the agenda. Anyone in the audience can have 3 minutes to approach the podium and the board and discuss anything that is not on the agenda. All right, nobody in the room. How about online? Anyone online like to speak for open forum? All right, we'll keep moving. First up under discussion and possible action, Fraser River Valley Housing Partnership update. Rob Clemens.
Thank you, Board of Trustees. My name is Rob Clemens. I'm the Executive Director of the Fraser River Valley Housing Partnership. Just to give a general overview, it was formed in 2022 in the spring and was funded by a ballot initiative 6A that by Property Mills. And we are now in our second year of actually collecting funds. So the first year it raised $1.2 million. Second year we were at 1.6. And the goal is to increase workforce housing across the region. So part of this was we set up an RFP process. In the initial first month of ask, the initial ask was $9 million to help support projects. And that, obviously doesn't quite work for us right now. And we are not allowed to, because of state statute, are not allowed to borrow against future tax revenue. So basically we are trying to find a way to leverage the funds to help projects get moving. And we started with some smaller projects that ran into challenges with both HOAs and variance challenges. And we learned a few lessons this past year. But we've been really focused right now on the bigger town projects and how we can help get them over the finish line and help secure their financial stack. The projects that are in the queue right now include in Granby, Noosh Village, which some people know as the rodeo project or the Highway 40 project. A LIHTC project, the Summit at Granby, that's been through kind of 2 applications at the 9% level. They're now in the queue for a 4% LIHTC. And Victoria Village is and has a piece of that that's in the LIHTC, also 4% round, in addition to the other 2 buildings that are not in part of the LIHTC project. And then we're right now in the due diligence about doing 14 units on townhomes, doing a land acquisition for that right now. That's in the Grand Lake area, or not Grand Lake, sorry, Grand Elk. And so the idea there is trying to make sure that we're not cannibalizing different AMIs in different projects and such. And that we have until December. And so that's a project that we keep discussing within our board, but is at the moment we're just under contract and waiting to see if it will actually pencil out. But if everything worked out and all the LIHTC dollars came through and everything works out great, these are projects that are looking to go vertical in 2025. That becomes a gray area for me. And these are different phases. So I'm expecting in 2026 probably to have about 300 additional workforce units in the valley. And then using that to help build other projects from there or the second phase of some of these. In our budget, as we're developing that, because everybody's developing that right now, our priority, we are developing programs, and programs would be incentive programs and buy downs and things like that. But we're not really looking to fund those programs fully until we are making sure that these projects are actually moving forward. Because I don't think that those cannibalizing the dollars has a much more negative impact if we apply it more to programming. I know people want things done faster. That would be great, but not everybody's willing to, the market's really not supportive of a lot of extra deed restrictions, especially if it comes with a price appreciation cap. And so I think that there'll be a lot more marketing required for some of our incentive programs for them to have a material impact. One other element that we are looking at is the housing needs assessment that was done in 2022, officially hits its 3-year mark in 2025. And it becomes stale for applying for Prop 123 dollars and some other grant funds out there. And can't be used. We use some funds this year to help update that. It wasn't a full update. But there's a new law that just went into effect. And it was SB 24-174, if you really are curious. But basically it's the statewide housing needs assessment process. At the end of 2024, they will tell us the methodology that they will accept for housing needs assessments. We hope to submit ours, and because it was done in 2022, and if it is accepted, that'll give us a little window where that will apply until 2026 is when everybody has to do a housing needs assessment. And every 6 years after that, and in 2027, everybody gets to come up with a housing action plan to put into effect. So this is the state's approach. And right now we're ahead of the curve and hopefully can maintain that to be able to still secure grant funding in 2025. But that's where we're trying to focus on some of those things that'll come up, and for staff would be a burden and hopefully make some of that a little bit easier across the region. And now I'm open for any questions.
Where's all the, all your funds come from? Is it from that tax, initiative that for the county? You get
Yes.
state money too?
So it's all property taxes, the 2 mills on the assessed values of the properties within my boundary. And the boundary is Granby, cut out a little bit, all the way up to Winter Park. So it includes sections, there are portions of Grand County unincorporated and such that are not in my boundary. But it's all the townships are definitely there.
So basically along 40 from Granby to Winter Park.
Yep. And the monies can be used to support workforce housing for employers within my boundary. Anything else?
A lot of good information. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the update.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, moving on. Ordinance 516, short-term rental fire inspection and permit number, Antoinette and Ryan Mowry.
So I'm going to present the subject matter, and then I'm going to have Ryan Mowry speak to how this applies to the fire department and how their inspections will go. I cannot speak to that as well. So the fire department last week did pass an ordinance that allows them to opt to do short-term rental fire and life and safety inspection program. The resolution adopts a requirement for short-term for inspection of short-term rental vacation rentals. This is applicable to any property, however defined by Grand County, the town of Fraser, the town of Winter Park, which is intended for use of more than one or more persons on a rental basis of a structure, mobile home, mobile property, boat, or other parcel of occupancy, which may be listed for daily, weekly, or monthly rentals as a vacation property by use by somebody, by an individual other than the owner. Now, if the owner lives in the home and rents a bedroom, they would be exempt from this because they do live there. And currently, I think we have maybe one of those in the town. So what this would be is the inspection would be conducted online by a property owner. And this will be a virtual way that they can conduct the inspection. It's considered a self-inspection. The fire department does have a system in place of which the short-term rental, either the property management company or the owner of the property, however the property is managed, would be the ones to go through the inspection. The inspection does require, and it's an annual inspection, and there is $100 fee annually for the fire department to conduct the inspection. And if they are successful, then there's basically, it's a certificate. It might be an email. I'm not exactly sure how that will be communicated with the homeowner from the fire department, of which then that property management company or that homeowner would then have to upload that documentation that they passed this inspection into our short-term rental software so that we know that they've passed this inspection, so that they can now be approved for either their new short-term rental or their renewal of their short-term rental property. Now, if for some reason the self-inspection would not be successful and the fire department would have to do a physical inspection, there are additional fees required for that. A studio or one bedroom was $160, a 2 to 3 bedroom was $260, and a 4-bedroom plus is $360 if the fire department does have to come out and manually administer that inspection. We do currently have written into our code that if anybody is going to need to be inspected, an entry and inspection should only be permitted between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. after providing the property manager of the STR at least 7 business days written notice of the intent to inspect. So the fire department would work with the property in order to do this inspection. And the property owner or manager is required to coordinate that with the emergency services, which is the fire department. And then if there's a compliance inspection that is needed at random for public safety concern, it has been reported, then they can also schedule that inspection. Again, that's already written in our code. The certificate of successful inspection will be uploaded into our short-term rental, as I said. So this is a program that the fire department wants to is implementing and is really wanting to work with the town to make it a successful program. And they're requesting this of the town for us to initiate this program. And then the other part of this proposed ordinance is currently we don't require the short-term rental registration number to be listed on the platform where your STR is being advertised. And it does create some issues for us because we sometimes have a hard time determining what house it is, what location is it the address? If the short-term rental license number is listed on the listing, it's much easier for us to find them in our software rather than kind of trying to guess. So it tells us either they are registered or they're not registered. So it's just really a helpful feature for us to have. And it is required for a lot of towns. And a lot of platforms already have them listed, even though we don't currently require that. Are there any questions for me on the ordinance or what we're proposing?
I have a question. For you.
Okay.
So, on 6/8/30, A6,
Yes.
for all short-term rental registrations, renewals after October 31st, the certificate of valid inspection from East Grand Fire Protection District dated within the previous 12 months is required. Do we need to spell it out that this is required annually? They renew annually, but nothing says that it's annual. It's
It
an
says-
annual expectation. Of course, their license comes up annually.
Renewals. We could add that verbiage that it would be an annual requirement. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
I think
To
the
make it
dated
more
within
clear.
the previous 12 months means it's annual.
yeah, and I just felt like it could been a little more clear. But
I just
that's
thought-
me.
The wording, change the wording.
Yeah, I showed it to Ryan and I asked to see what he had to say.
Yeah, so if we don't want to spell it out in here, one of the concerns from property managers and Winter Park, we kind of did like a focus group, was, is this an indefinite annual inspection? And we don't know the answer to that yet. If we spell out in here that it is annual, then you guys would have to readopt. If for 5 years down the road, we're like, we're gonna go to every other year, we're seeing so much compliance, we're not finding issues.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay,
we'd readopt it, but, and I don't know, I guess this resolution is making us become a part in the process of registration or renewals. So maybe by leaving it vague, if we're requiring it to be annual,
okay,
but just a thought.
interesting.
It's,
And it does say, dated within the previous 12 months is required. So to me, that does say it's annually.
Okay,
I do see where you're coming from, like.
Yeah.
It's one initial inspection sometime within 12 months. So yeah, that's really kind of more up to you guys. It is kind of on our radar to assess this program and the success of it and safety. And if we're seeing, hey, most people are doing really good, let's bump these back to every other year, every third year. So we
okay.
just have to come back and readopt it, but
And Ryan, would you introduce yourself?
yeah, sorry, Ryan Mallory, East Grand Fire.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, and any
So I
other-
can leave it as it is then.
Ryan, what kind of information have you gathered or somebody gathered?
for what's being gathered in the inspection. So it's going to be a fire and life safety inspection, similar to what we'd be doing in a commercial structure. So we currently inspect commercial structures, commercial hotels, for fire suppression systems, egress lighting, a whole sorts of things, electrical issues. We're not getting into short-term rentals because they're private property. They're not listed as commercial. I don't think the state's going in that direction. I don't think we'll see Airbnb. I think they'll fight back on it.
Things that comes to mind. Let's check is like occupancy, stuff like that. You guys- I mean,
So-
I'm trying to play things out and see.
Yeah, No, good question. So on a typical residential structure, there's not an occupant load given to it per se, like we would a bar or a theater or something. That's calculated by square feet. It's usually there are some calculations in the building code, but they're not always the same in the residential code. And it depends on what that house was built with. So we're going back to the 70s, the 60s on some of our homes in here. What we are looking at is that our bedrooms have egress. There's safety for our guests to the valley, and then there's a level of safety for first responders going to these unfamiliar houses that we're going to a little bit more often. We're not proposing to limit how many beds can be in a however many square foot condo. I think that's going to be more on the short-term rental license with the town, with you guys. On if you do it by square footage, if you do it per bedroom. So that's not really something we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on like the level of safety in the structure as it exists now. So the information we'd be collecting is like how many bedrooms. It's not asking how many it sleeps, but do those sleeping areas have egress? What kind of systems does this building have? If it's a older condo with no fire suppression, we're gonna have to look at stuff a little bit closer, make sure there's not tripping hazards. On newer buildings with fire suppression, are those systems being inspected? Are those being turned in? Stuff like that. Another kind of aspect that's going to be working behind the scenes on this program will be we're creating kind of a first response software. It's a software we already have, but when we get paged to an address, we're going to have a little bit more information coming in on the truck on the way there. So if we know it's a short-term rental, we probably know we're not going to ask these guys certain questions on the house because they're going to have no idea. Like, well, where's the breaker panel, or what year's the spoiler from? So kind of collecting some of that information on the front end, getting a good emergency contact
a lot of times is very helpful, especially at 2 a.m, which is when smoke detectors only die. That if it's just going off and the neighbor calls it in, maybe we can get a key code, we can call the management company. And so we're kind of creating a response database that's aiding us in our response. And it's also creating it's an education platform too, for whether it's the homeowner or the property manager to kind of go through this checklist and like, hey, I didn't know that your smoke detectors are bad after 10 years. They need to be replaced. Doesn't matter if you put a battery in them every year, they do go bad. So kind of information platform in addition to the self-inspection. So we're not trying to catch people. We're trying to educate and help with the inspection. It'll be a app on their phone. I think for most folks, it'll be the property managers doing it, and they're going to get pretty good at doing it because they're in there doing these inspections. It just might be items that weren't on their list before to check for safety features and electric panels and shock risks, stuff like that. So it's really built more for education and compliance. We're not trying to catch people, shut people down, or do any fines. That's definitely not the goal here, but just to create safer lodging for the guests of the valley, safer response for our first responders.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So this ordinance you pass, is this binding to the town?
No, it's not.
Why do we need to?
So, are you referring to our
Yeah, your
resolution?
yes, and is it, so if you've already passed this and we are in the jurisdiction, then why are we having to pass another ordinance?
There's not a requirement for the town to adopt this.
Okay,
So it's not specifically spelled out in the fire code. We don't enforce building code, residential code, any of that. So we do have a right to request inspections in commercial occupancies.
Yeah, I think the ordinance is changing our code to implement what they're trying to do into our short-term rental registration process, correct, Antoinette? Yeah, so
the resolution that you guys are looking at is for us to become a step in your process, which would be the only teeth in the fight, kind of, because we cannot request to go into a person's home unless there is an emergency.
so and this would pertain to ADUs and any structure on the property as long as it's short-term rental.
So if you guys are issuing a license to them for short-term rental to be in that section of it, again, if it's an occupied by the owner and then you're renting a bedroom, that place is being upkept more than likely, and there's someone
long-term
familiar.
rentals it wouldn't be subject to the same
Correct.
inspection.
We would not be looking at long-term rentals on
Okay.
this. This would just be for our transient traveler going through the valley.
And I guess my last question is around liability. This is kind of a question I had for Kent. Does this subject us to potential liability that we have a program, we're saying we do inspections and there's a problem, there's a fire and someone gets killed. Are we on the hook? Are we liable for that? Because we have actually held out that we have this program to inspect a home for, safety issues.
Mhm.
And there was a safety issue, maybe they didn't know about it, maybe they lied about it, whatever, but basically we've sanctioned it, we've approved it.
Right.
Do we have liability? And I guess that's one of my biggest concerns. And who would be, obviously they would name everybody, right?
Right. Yeah.
But
I
the
definitely am not the
homeowners-
one to answer the question. We did have our legal team write our disclaimer in the inspection to it, as non-binding. It's that at the time of the inspection, this is what existed. Tomorrow that might not exist. They might slide the bunk beds back against the window. But that is a good question. I don't have the answer.
Can we get that answered? Because I just be concerned, we're gonna roll out a program to inspect short-term rentals to verify that they're, in compliance. And if we're doing it virtually, we don't have a great way to verify that they're telling the truth to begin with. If there's a problem, then are we potentially on the hook for it?
I can ask that question.
Look, I'll send you what we have to
Okay.
in the inspection that they sign at the end. And that might give some more clarity to it. I don't have it in front of me.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Any other questions?
I would like to clarify on the occupancy question. Currently written into the town code for short-term rentals, it is 2 people per bedroom, plus an additional 4 for the entire house or unit. So we do have occupancy limits already.
And how do we verify that? Is it
So
just complaints?
Caitlin mostly administers our short-term rental program, and she does actually go through the pictures and the listings and see how many bedrooms are listed, how many people they advertise for being able to stay there.
Mm.
So she
I'm
is,
working on that right now.
it is verified. It is.
Some HOAs I do know have other restrictions within a community too that might be more restrictive.
Yeah.
Which I know that you and I.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if an HOA has more restrictive covenants, the town does not look at their HOAs and tell them what they can and cannot do. We make sure that they meet the town code, and then it's really the HOA and the homeowner's responsibility to make sure that they're meeting their covenants within their HOA.
Okay, so you're just verifying whatever listing they have on Airbnb is consistent with our code.
Mhm.
But if they have, a group that shows up and has twice as many, then the only way we would catch that is if there's a complaint to the police, right?
Yes, and we do, when we do receive complaints, we do let people know that the process is to call the police. It is a civil matter. And then there's a police report, then there's some evidence that something has happened, and that can be proof of whatever violation that could be. Rather than your neighbor didn't like you and they called the police for some reason.
Chief, do you send out code enforcement or do you guys go out yourself?
Well, if it's in the middle of either like a noise complaint,
Yeah.
a police officer would respond. I mean, we have one code enforcement officer.
I saw him today.
24/7.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Give them paper.
Do we have access to this survey as well? I mean, we're a conduit to get it to you, it sounds like. But
you repeat that,
do we
sir?
have access to the results? It sounds like she's going through and proofing out these licenses right now, and this could be a great tool to assist in that. Is this information available to Fraser as well?
I guess like the inspection reports could be, if that's something you guys would be interested in,
And I would leave that open.
yeah.
I mean, I would recommend leaving the enforcement with the fire department.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking if it's a tool that could help us meet other means,
Yeah, I think,
as in what you were just describing.
It's a upload for all the STRs and renewals
Mhm,
for them to upload it for the certification.
mhm.
So then we know that they passed.
yeah, and so
Okay.
they'll get an email, and then if you guys prefer a PDF, we can set it up that way. The owner or property manager will also receive a copy of the report, and then we can add comments to it.
Okay.
And resubmit it back to them. But it's really how much, like, they're 10 to
Are you
12
volunteering?
pages. I don't know how many.
I don't think I'm not sure either. Question, I'd like the board to hear. So if somebody fails that self-inspection, do they get the opportunity to correct?
Yeah.
Several times before you guys have to go out and physically
Yeah.
inspect?
Yeah, like I said, it's really more an informational tool to help people get to compliance.
Yes.
We don't want to be hitting them with fines and going out. We want to work with them, and so I just think on some, we might find that we have to do it in person, that we're just not getting the result that we're looking for, or there's just, it looks terrible. Like
Yeah.
there's just wires hanging out of walls, there's whatever it may be. So the goal would be to work with them before we go out in person. But, and we can resubmit that inspection to them. So they can just do it again. It doesn't cost us to keep doing it. They need to do it 2 or 3 times. They're probably not gonna want to do it 2 or 3 times. So they're probably just gonna want, the goal would be like, correct the issue, send us a photo of verification, and then we would just move the status to passed, and they would get the email.
Caitlin, with the question about occupancy, the short-term rental software that you guys are looking at, does it pull the advertising occupancy for each short-term rental?
Yeah, so it pops up with a violation or possible violation. It will say exceed occupancy.
Mhm.
So then I'll go back to their advertisement and verify how many bedrooms they have, how many people they really have, and see if there's a difference, and then contact that property management if there's a discrepancy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ryan.
That's great. It's a lot of work that you guys put into this.
I'll take public comment. I have 3 minutes, Mr. Quinn.
I was just wondering, how many fires have we had from nightly rentals, in Fraser? Because I haven't heard as many, so this seems a lot to do about nothing. It's just another cost for people to rent their homes as nightly rentals, so how many fires have we seen?
There's not
Yes,
very
okay.
many fires. We do go to a lot of dead batteries and smoke detectors. We go to a lot of false alarms. Went to a pilot light the other night for just kind of unaware people. So it's taxing on our EMS and fire system just for routine calls that are preventable on kind of this more maintenance issues. The majority of our fires, and we don't have a ton of fires, but there's a lot of kind of other aspects of the emergency response that this would be addressing, more than life safety of someone if they needed to get out prior to an emergency.
Anyone else? Anybody online? Okay. So we could entertain a motion, or we could table it if you wanted to look at.
Well, yeah, I don't want to put Ken on the spot, but I had a question, I guess a legal question around, and you don't have to answer this now, but whether or not, approving this ordinance is going to put us in any liability that we're, creating a program for inspections of fire, I guess it's fire and safety inspections of short-term rentals. And is that going to put the town at any legal risks that, we have this program, we verified that they are compliant, and then there's a problem, there's a fire, somebody
Yeah.
gets killed, and then, there's a lawsuit. Are we potentially on the hook?
Yeah. Sorry, Louis, I came in late and
Yeah, no,
I
I
haven't
just-
taken a look at the
I
ordinance
just wanted to throw
before.
that
I
out
can
there.
take a look at it though and
So,
let you guys know.
so Kent, what we're doing is, East Grand Fire has already adopted a program for inspecting short-term rentals and providing a certification to the short-term rental owner. What we're looking at doing is, our code already allows for this, for emergency services to do inspections if there's a concern. But what we're looking at is passing an ordinance to allow, basically integrate as part of our short-term rental registration process, that the fire department does, they provide a letter, a certificate saying that they're good to go for their meeting their fire code requirements for their building. We get that certification, and that's just part of the checklist for the short-term rental registration. So Lewis's question about liability is, it's a good question. But they do have a disclaimer, so we can get the disclaimer and we can get that to you and kind of make an informed decision on that.
Absolutely. I'll take a look at it.
I mean, I
So
think the
it's-
intention is good,
Yeah.
but whether or not it has any unintended consequences of, we're not.
I know in some other safety inspections such as backflow, it's an instant in time. If there was a backflow incident the day after a passing test, it's the day after, and the backflow tester is not held responsible for that. So I'm kind of thinking it's probably in that same boat where it's as of the moment and it's a snapshot, and that liability does not carry forward because circumstances can change without knowledge the next day. But that'd be my guess.
I'll certainly take a look at it, Louis.
Well, I mean, but we're not actually going out there and do a physical inspection. We're doing a virtual inspection, relying on the homeowner.
Well, we are not the fire department.
Right, I know, but we're potentially liable because we're signing off on the program. But if there's a problem and the homeowner either, doesn't know about it or hides it intentionally or whatever, could we potentially have liability from that? I don't know. It's just a
Ryan,
question for you.
Ryan, as part of your process, is it a kind of a sign off from the property manager that they do meet, they have read and are meeting the fire code requirements per the fire code?
Yeah, so to be able to submit the inspection to us, they do have to click to agree. that disclaimer and that
Mhm.
what they've provided is true to the best of their knowledge, yada, 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 3 pages.
Okay.
So, and I think it's a great question, and I want to send you the disclaimer that we have and make sure that, that we're all covered too. Currently, do you guys have in the process agree to because there is a small safety checklist of fire extinguishers and smoke detectors and they agree to something currently.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's probably worded pretty similar to the best of my ability that they're all in working order,
That's
something like that. So I don't know how much more we're adding. I think we're checking a few more things. But it's definitely a good question. These are important topics, so I think it's worth looking into.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like Parnell, it's adding additional fees and another burden, sort of administrative burden for people that have short-term rentals, but I think the intention is good. It's just whether or not there's some unintended consequence that we're not thinking through. So can I make a motion to table it until the next meeting until we get an answer from our attorney?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll get the disclaimer stuff.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, and you guys keep doing your thing. That's awesome. Thank you.
Keep doing it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nari. Okay, moving on to the Village at Grand Park filing 3 preliminary plat motion to continue the matter. Garrett.
Good evening, board. The item before you on this agenda is a motion to continue the hearing for the Village at Grand Park filing 3. Just to kind of go over a bit of timeline, it's kind of laid out in the staff report that's in the packet. But just speaking to that, for those who aren't familiar or trustees who aren't on the Planning Commission, during the July 24th meeting of the Planning Commission, the commission passed resolution 2024-0702, which recommended denial of the preliminary plat and final plan development plan or FPDP application for the Village at Grand Park filing 3. Usually the Planning Commission is the final review and decision-making body for preliminary plat applications. However, because the commission simply recommended denial of the preliminary plat as opposed to denying it outright, the Planning Commission therefore opted to send the decision to the next highest review body, which in this case is the Fraser Board of Trustees. Our code requires that the board meet or hold a hearing within 45 days of the date of the Planning Commission action. Therefore, the board must act on the preliminary plat application no later than September 7th. But our code does allow for a continuance, either, for a period not to exceed 30 days or a longer period if it is requested by the applicant. And on August 23rd, town staff received an email from Layla Rosales on behalf of the applicant, just requesting that this board action be postponed to a later date. A 30-day continuance will require this application be considered by the board on either September 18th or October 2nd for a final decision. A couple other things I want to talk about. The Planning Commission considered a preliminary plat application and an FPDP application. Both were considered under a public hearing, as is required by code. It is only the decision to approve or deny the preliminary plat that is being advanced to the board. The FPDP was recommended for denial. The board will obviously look at the FPDP in conjunction with their decision on the preliminary plat, but the board, in my opinion, and per code, does not need to approve or deny the FPDP outright. They can recommend approval or denial of the FPDP for filing 3. With regards to the Village at Grand Park filing 4 application, the Planning Commission denied the preliminary plat application outright at the July 24th Planning Commission meeting. They also recommended denial of the FPDP. The applicant is stating that they wished for the FPDP for filing 4, which I will again state that had the preliminary plat denied outright, They wish for the FPDP to also be considered by the board for this separate application. It is town staff's opinion that the board should not consider the FPDP for the Village at Grand Park filing for, because the preliminary plat was denied. It should not advance any further. The application should go back to the Planning Commission before it goes to the board. There is clear evidence in past decisions and approvals of plats and FPDPs in Grand Park showing that the FPDP only advances to the board when the final plat is also advancing to the board for approval or denial. So, for example, West Mountain Filing 1, planning areas 10W and 11W. The preliminary plat and FPDP were approved, rather, the preliminary plat was approved. FPDP was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission in March of 2023. The FPDP went back to the Planning Commission alongside the applicant's final plat application, and both were recommended for approval in May of 2024, over a year later, by the Planning Commission. Both the final plat and the FPDP advanced to the board for final approval in June of 2024. This is also the case for Elk Creek Condos 4W1. The FPDP was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission first in March of 2022 and again in May of 2023. And then the FPDP was ultimately approved by the board in July of 2023. In the case of Alpenglow, formerly known as the Willows Apartments, the Planning Commission approved the preliminary plat and recommended approval of the FPDP in May of 2021. The final plat and FPDP were recommended for approval by the Planning Commission in February of 2022. The FPDP and final plat were approved by the board in November of 2023. That's over a year after the Planning Commission's approval of those back in February of the year prior. So I just again want to reiterate, this motion is for a continuance on only the filing 3 application, and ultimately the decision that the board will make is approval or denial of the preliminary plat. I know I just said a lot of jargon, so if there's any questions, please let me know and I'm happy to clarify them.
Okay, so was the filing for, or we denied the FDPD?
For filing 4, the Planning Commission denied the preliminary plat
Preliminary plat.
and recommended denial of the FPDP.
Okay, so, but that's not being considered now. It's just filing 3.
Correct.
And filing 3, it's just the one piece.
So for filing 3, the approval or denial decision is specifically for the preliminary plat.
Okay,
But the FPDP will obviously be reviewed in tandem with that plat document to understand
future.
the uses that are proposed, the buildings, their orientation within the planning area. I do think it would be appropriate for the board, in conjunction with their decision on the preliminary plat for filing 3, to make a recommendation on the FPDP in the resolution that is passed by the board at that time.
Future time. Okay.
Correct.
I don't see a problem with continuing it.
The applicant has some comments.
There's no resolution. I'm sorry, there's no resolution or action we're taking tonight.
It would just be a motion
A motion
to continue the matter or continue the hearing.
Yeah, we, the applicant, are respectfully requesting continuing the hearing for both filing 3 and filing 4 FPDPs, which are the FPDPs for 1WA, 2W.3, and 1WA.6. FPDPs are not linked to preliminary plats, and the Planning Commission recommended denial, did not deny the FPDP. So due process has it, the FPDP comes before this board. That's the process that's set forth in the documents, and that's what we're requesting.
Is there a section of the code that we can pull up for reference, Garrett?
I'd be happy to.
Curious, we're being asked for continuance. What are the consequences of not continuing?
So there must be a continuance on filing 3, simply because, well, one, the applicant has requested it. They're seeking to revise their plans to address the comments contained in the Planning Commission's recommendation of denial from their July meeting. And in order to facilitate, an appropriate review of those changes and allow extra time, town staff must be receptive to that request for a continuance so that those changes can be made and that staff can review them. If, under a hypothetical case where no changes were being made, then what was presented to the Planning Commission would have been presented to you all this evening, and then a final action be taken. But because there are changes, and those changes could not be made within that 45-day time frame, essentially we have to allow this continuance for at least 30 days. Again, just for filing 3, and not for filing 4.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to
Right,
grant the
he's-
continuance. I'm
He
sorry.
was gonna bring
Oh,
up
I mean, it sounds like we don't. have much of a
regulations.
choice.
So
Yeah, on 3, true.
I'm no longer in the Zoom meeting. I'll reference Appendix 1 of our Land Development Code. Our checklist for FPDPs requires that it states any preliminary or final subdivision plats required and prepared as per the requirements of Article 3 of this chapter. Article 3 being our subdivision regulations, which speaks to plats and their approval process. So again, a plat is required in tandem with an FPDP application. And based on the last 3 Grand Park approvals, those FPDPs were only approved concurrently with a final plat. So
Okay, gotcha.
based on prior precedents, it would be inappropriate for the FPDP for filing 4 to be considered by the board for approval or denial without an accompanying final plat application.
Okay, go for it.
Again, we'd like to request a continuance of both filing 3 and filing 4 FPDPs only, and specifically, the annexation agreement speaks, FPDPs are independent of the plats. They come before them, and that certainly can be heard by this board. And we did not get a denial of that at the Planning Commission, nor is it their prerogative per your code. So we would like to ask for a motion to continue both filing 3 and filing 4 of the FPDPs from this board so that we can bring forth those revised plans that hopefully will be in by end of this week, addressing comments that we heard from the Planning Commission. I will remind you all, this is for commercial and economic development and job creation in the town of Fraser. We think it's rather important. And we would like to have our due process and follow our agreements with the town. Thank you.
Garrett, what was the section of code that you were referencing?
Previously, I was referencing the checklist for final plan development plans that are contained in Appendix 1 of Chapter 19 in our Land Development Code. There's a lot of items on this checklist, one of them being subdivision plats. There's another section of our code. This is section 19.3-130. It states that it is the policy of the town to consider the subdivision of land and the subsequent development of the subdivided land as subject to the control of the town pursuant to this chapter, et cetera, et cetera. I think that language also, my understanding of that is that no zoning approvals, whether that's a site plan or an FPDP, should be considered on unsubdivided land, i.e. land that does not have an approved plat, subdivision plat, that accompanies that planning and zoning document. I can pull up the annexation agreement, to try and find the section that the applicant just referenced. But I think there are certainly areas of our code that fall on the side of the FPDP for filing for not going before the board without an accompanying subdivision plat.
I see a hand in the audience, but obviously I am recused from this topic, so I am not, I can't say anything. So if someone else wants to bring that up, they can.
Well, the motion to continue the matter for filing 3, I think is pretty clear cut. I'm a little confused about filing 4. And there seems to be some disagreement on that. I mean, can we push that to the next meeting? It seems like there's somebody needs to do more research on it and understand who's right on that.
Well, we need to continue the public hearing. What's being requested by the applicant is to continue to include the FPDP for filing 4. In addition to the continuance of filing 3 preliminary plat and the FPDP related to filing 3. So 2 things here, filing 3 and filing 4.
Right.
Filing 3 preliminary plat, which was a continuance. It was a recommended denial by the planning commission, but is going to come to the board for final approval. With filing 3 is the FPDP, which is related to the subdivision zoning. Correct, Garrett?
Yes.
Filing 4, the preliminary plat was denied by the planning commission, but there's also the FPDP. What we're trying to figure out is legal precedence as far as the ability to continue the FPDP for filing 4.
But the only thing in our packet is filing 3, not filing 4.
Right, but the applicant's requesting that to add the FPDP for filing 4
Yeah.
to this continuance, this motion to continue the public hearing.
As I recall, that filing 4 is in what was zoned as open space in the past or designated as open space.
Open space facilities in 23W.
Yeah. So
And so it was denied outright.
that's one that we denied
Filing 4 was denied, correct, Garrett?
the plat,
Preliminary plat
preliminary plat.
denied.
Yeah.
Not the final plan. Clark Lipscomb for the record. I would like to just remind you all, this is a PDD. And the FPDP is the next step in the PDD, and FPDP does not require a plat to be processed with an FPDP. That's clearly set forth in the annexation agreement. I couldn't pull it up on my phone. Sorry, I didn't bring my computer tonight. But nonetheless, that hence the reason the planning commission didn't deny the FPDP. They don't have the authority to. We'd request that continuance come here for filing 4 as well on the FPDP only. And you guys can decide, are you approving of it or denying of it? But that is the process that's set forth, and that's the process that should happen. The fact that historically we've run concurrent processes on these has no bearing on the legal documents themselves and the process that sets forth in those documents. That's our choice as the developer and the landowner. So again, I don't think continuing the filing for FPDP hurts anything. I think they all go hand in hand, and it allows for a consistent presentation to this board so that you can see what was presented and also what's been addressed from the comments that were heard at the planning commission. And there are 2 sections that are key and integral to the submittals in the annexation agreement, those being section 4.2 and section 4.3. of the annexation agreement, which I know Mr. Whitmer's well aware of. And nonetheless, I think it's important that we look at this as a whole and get a continuance for both filing 3 and filing 4 on the FPDP, recognizing obviously a preliminary plat would have to go back to the planning commission at a later date, depending on the outcome of that meeting, but that's neither here nor there for the purposes of continuing what was a recommendation of denial, not a denial from the planning commission.
Yeah, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with Garrett's logic here. It's hard to approve an FPDP without a final plat being considered at the same time.
Or
It's
preliminary?
sort of like getting the cart before the horse. On the other hand, I don't see a downside to giving the applicant an opportunity to continue all of it, and this board considers all of it as in one fell swoop too. So I think it's 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other.
And this is just discussion, right? There's no formalities. I'm looking at the agenda. It is only for filing 3. This isn't the public hearing that we're in. It's
So he's, what the applicant's asking is for the FPDP what we're filing for to be included in the continuance of the public hearing. So for the board, when it comes to the trustees, it would be the preliminary plat and the FPDP for filing 3 and the FPDP for filing 4.
yeah, I understand that. I was just making sure that being that this is specific to one of those filings, that we weren't limited to that. We're just in discussion.
But the
So-
question is, do you include that in the continuance of the public hearing or not?
Mhm.
That's what's currently discussed. More. Comments from public?
It's not up to me.
I guess I'm confused because somebody said filing 4 was denied by planning.
The preliminary plat was denied. The FPDP was recommended for denial.
How could we continue something that was denied? I just need to
So
understand.
there are two different things. There's the FPDP, which is the zoning, and there's
Yeah.
the plat for what you're gonna be
Mhm.
doing with the zoning. So the claim is that even though the preliminary plat was denied, that the FPDP is a separate item. Gary's saying it's tied to the plat. The applicant's saying it's not tied to the plat.
Okay.
I have the annexation agreement up in front of us. This is section 3.3, and I think what the applicant may be referring to is this sentence that starts whenever any action is required to be taken by developer, et cetera, et cetera. It says in here, and the FPDP and subdivision do not occur concurrently, then the action shall be required at the time of the first such process to occur unless otherwise reasonably determined by Fraser. That's a lot of word salad. I really don't know what that means, but it seems to be speaking to this process where they do not occur at the same time, where the subdivision process and the FPDP are seeking to not occur at the same time. But I do see a otherwise reasonably determined by Fraser. I think that gives the town a bit of a leeway here in the process.
So one of my thoughts is if we still need to have the plat for filing 4 come back to us,
Mhm.
the amount of workload that this will place on staff in preparing for this meeting, will be, is it creating additional work for you guys that's just gonna have to be repeated or something in the future, or does it affect staff and your staff time by splitting things up?
I think the primary impact of bringing the FPDP for filing 4 back in terms of staff time would be dependent on the degree of changes that the applicant wishes to make to the filing 4 application, which at this time are not determined. It has not been resubmitted. But recognizing that the planning commission's denial and recommendation of denial for those filing 4 applications was quite strong
Mhm.
and recognizing that it would take substantial changes for it to gain approval. I think staff's review of the filing for application, probably regardless of how much it is revised, would not be a significant undertaking compared to the review of the revised filing 3 application, which is certainly going to go before the board in the future.
I want to make a point of clarification, Garrett. This is one application with 2 parts. And in fact, you stated that at the last meeting as well, correct, at the planning commission? So we're actually operating under one application with 2 different components. And we separated them after the first planning commission hearing, trying to address planning commission comments, but we all agreed it was considering continuing with the same single application, correct? There's not 2 separate applications. I just want to make that clear for everyone here. Is that correct?
I would say that is not correct. The planning commission has 2 separate resolutions, considered both applications, filing 3 and filing 4, independently from each other. And both applications had separate public notices, 2 separate newspaper notices, one mailing out to adjacent property owners, but could contain 2 sets of plans. And frankly, the bifurcation, the splitting of this into 2 separate applications is one of the primary reasons why it went back to the planning commission, because we considered it essentially 2 new applications that required new public hearings and independent actions. Frankly, town staff didn't require additional review fees to be paid or application fees. So in a way, we did provide a concession to the applicant in our consideration of their splitting their original proposal into 2.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that at the beginning of the planning commission, you outlined that it was one application, and I know that we only filled out one application. We were trying to work with staff to address some comments that were from the first planning commission. We didn't really even want to go back to planning commission. We were trying to come to the town board. But it was staff suggesting that it go back to planning commission, but I'm really pretty confident of the statement that you made at the beginning, but we can pull that up for the record. But regardless, again, I don't think it hurts. I think Kent supported this, having both of them continued and heard by this body. An FPDP is a zoning document, and it's the final plan setting forth, basically proceeding from the preliminary plan. So, thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Village of Grand Park filing 3 preliminary plat continuance.
It sounds like the
Just-
same motion I made earlier.
Yep,
I'll second.
yeah, just filing 3.
May I suggest a rewording of that motion?
Yes,
I would suggest a motion to continue the matter on the Village at Grand Park filing 3 preliminary plat application for a period not to exceed 30 days. Sure, and FPDP.
I'll second.
did you get that, Infinite?
I did. Let me read it. Trustee Sauls moved and trustee Gregory seconded the motion to continue the matter, the Village at Grand Park filing 3 preliminary plat discussion to a future meeting for a period not to exceed 30 days.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Are you running the meeting now?
She's also refused.
Oh, goodbye.
But you can still take your role as mayor, right?
I don't think so.
No? Okay. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back. Moving on to economic incentives program. Sarah, could you answer it?
Good evening, Board, Mayor. Tonight we are revisiting economic development. We had a workshop back in June and talked about some possible economic development incentives and potential changes to the business enhancement grant. So I'm going to do just kind of a quick review of some of those kind of key takeaways and context that got us to this evening. And then we'll discuss what we are proposing. So looking to really recognize the importance of the Fraser business community to the town of Fraser. The majority of town general funds do come from sales tax. So our ability to provide services, infrastructure, and amenities really is based on the success of our local businesses. In many ways, our business community is the heart of Fraser. We also want to recognize the high cost of construction and operations of businesses right now. Particularly construction costs have really skyrocketed in recent years, and just the ongoing challenges of doing business in a mountain community. Fluctuations in the season, trying to retain local workforce, again, high operating cost. And so looking at ways that the town can better support economic development through supporting both new and current businesses. In 2017, the Downtown Fraser Strategic Plan crafted 5 goal statements that had been developed from public input to describe the vision for Fraser's downtown. These goals included developing a vibrant town center that serves as a focal point for the community and encourages people to stop, preserving and building upon Fraser's fun, eclectic, and historic character, using Fraser's funkiness to bolster the town's unique identity, as well as in creating a cohesive downtown, developing a diverse and resilient local economy that supports locally owned and operated businesses, in addition to fostering entrepreneurship, increase mobility choices from getting around town on foot to regional travel via mass transit, and expanding and diversifying local housing options. Additionally, in 2017, the Board of Trustees, after years of stagnant commercial growth, had approved a robust commercial incentive program that ran through the end of 2019. Both Vicious Cycle and the distillery took advantage of those when they came into Fraser. In the fall of 2023, we presented a revised reduced package for consideration to the board. The board asked us to go back and revise that. I think with different board members having different reasons. Some wanted to see a more robust package. Some didn't believe any incentives should be offered, and others wanted more information. So in the workshop that we held back in June, we looked at what some different communities were doing and what Fraser might take from that. We also looked at some different data for the town of Fraser itself. Some of the kind of key takeaways that we had found and presented in that workshop that we saw other communities using was making sure that incentives that were offered were significant enough to really have an impact. And that includes for the business enhancement grants. The town of Granby, for example, I believe it's $50,000 that they will offer to a particular business because they really wanted those incentives to a business to be able to do something with them, particularly given how expensive it has gotten for construction. Having flexible offerings, and this one's really kind of tied to those incentives. That we want to be able to be malleable to what a particular business might need and request. And along with these flexible offerings, having the ability to prioritize, to be able to incentivize businesses that we really see as meeting the town's economic development goals. I really didn't find communities that were offering blanket set incentives that any business that comes in gets X, Y, and Z. They're really a tool that are used to incentivize businesses that seem to be a good fit and to meet the community's economic development goals. That said, business incentives and grant money are seen as a manner through which the town can support the ongoing development of a resilient and diversified economy that will provide for a robust sales and commercial property tax base that will serve both residents and visitors. And again, trying to encourage economic development that will align with the vision of the 2017 Downtown Fraser Strategic Plan And coming up here, I would add, with the plan of development for the downtown area, as well as once we have the town comprehensive plan completed. And those are both obviously forthcoming. So what we had discussed back in June and what we're proposing now is that really we just have a program that's an open invitation, that it would allow for new commercial development and businesses to submit requests for economic incentives that would help make their new commercial endeavors financially and viable. We've worked with Kent to vet what we are able to offer as a statutory town. One of those incentives is an annual sales tax rebate of 4% of the municipal sales tax. This goes directly to a business owner. We are not here recommending that it would necessarily be 100% or 50%, or for that it would be for 5 years or 7 years. Again, this is where that flexibility would come in. Payment of water and wastewater plant investment fees that could be distributed over 2 years. This is something that would go to the developer, the actual property owner. And then additional incentives could be considered upon request. We would ask businesses to provide a written request that it would include a comprehensive business plan, the jobs to be created, projected sales and sales tax revenues, a site plan, the project cost. We would look to see a pro forma to see if there are gaps in what they need to be able to successfully bring this to fruition, and then what incentives they would like to request. Staff would initially have those conversations with the prospective developer or business. We're recommending that the DDA board could be involved in this process and initially reviewing those applications and providing a recommendation to the board. But ultimately, you would come in front of the board of trustees and you would have full discretion in approving these incentives or not. So the idea is not that any business that requests these incentives would get the incentives, but that we would have an open invitation out there to consider requests for incentives. And ultimately, you would come before the board whether or not to approve those. Evaluation criteria would include businesses that would help to fulfill Fraser's economic development goals and fit with the vision for downtown Fraser. Looking for comprehensive business plans, businesses that will generate significant sales tax revenue is a criteria, and really looking for businesses that would contribute one or more of the following: diversifying our economic base, providing a unique amenity, filling some sort of needed gap in the economy, presenting a regional draw, adding vitality to our downtown center, and providing public benefits. All proposals would have to be in line with our code. They would have to be in line with state statutes and what we are allowed to present. And again, ultimately, the decision would be with the board. So each economic incentive request would be considered as they came in on a case-by-case basis. I can continue on to the Fraser Business Enhancement Grants that would be geared towards current businesses, or I can stop and take questions now, however, whatever makes most sense.
You guys have questions about what's been presented so far?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you have any questions about what has been presented so far?
Otherwise, we can take questions about all of it at the end.
Okay, just at the end.
Right.
Yeah, after.
So we currently have the Fraser Business Enhancement Grant Program. It is meant to support current businesses and improve the economic vitality of Fraser by really recognizing that business facades largely affect people's impression and the presence of Fraser. So really encouraging enhancements to the physical appearance of business properties. We'd like to kind of expand that focus with an emphasis on also if a business wanted to help improve public infrastructure. So it could be improving a sidewalk in front of the business, other amenities, maybe they want to add a bench for public use or a water fountain, whatever it might be, those sorts of amenities, community gathering places that may be alongside a business, and increasing ADA accessibility throughout town and into different businesses. So some examples of eligible projects: publicly displayed art, landscaping, exterior, building facade improvements, renovations, painting, signage, ADA improvements, sidewalks, exterior lighting, gathering spaces, patios, and other related exterior improvements. In terms of differences between the current grant program and what we're proposing, it would be a maximum award of up to $25,000. Again, this would not be guaranteed, but that would be the maximum that typically could be approved. We'd still look to request a 50% project match, though lower matches could be considered, particularly for projects providing maximum public benefit. We have gotten some feedback from business owners that sometimes they don't have enough for that match, but they have a project that they think really would not just benefit their business, but the community. So that could be considered. We've had discussion of a single deadline, similar to what we've done with kind of the nonprofit different requests that now go through the Grant Foundation. Originally, we were looking at February 3rd. It's suggested that maybe March 3rd would give businesses a little bit more time, but we want to balance that date with giving applicants who may need this funding to move forward enough time to be ready to go for the summer when we assume that most of these improvements would be taking place. So that is something that I'd be interested in your feedback. Previously, these applications have come in on a rolling basis and they've just been generally approved by staff administratively as long as they met the program criteria. So we're recommending that we would have a single deadline, and if funding for projects remained after consideration of those initial applications, then we would continue to receive applications throughout the year on a rolling basis until funding for the year is exhausted. Again, evaluation criteria will continue to kind of fine tune this, but improvements providing the most public benefit would be prioritized. If it's improvement to public infrastructures, contributing to kind of the beautification or uniqueness of Fraser, by having applications come in at the same time, we can kind of weigh that criteria of the different applications at once. Again, we'd recommend that we work with the Downtown Development Authority to kind of do an initial review and provide a recommendation, and then would bring those recommendations in front of the Board of Trustees for approval. We're also hoping that the Downtown Development Authority can really be advocates for this program. We think it's a program that we've had and it's been underutilized and just undermarketed, frankly. It's kind of been on the books, but we haven't done too much in terms of active, promotion. So we think having more kind of foot soldiers on the ground there will be helpful in getting more businesses to take advantage of this. Because again, we do see it contributing to the larger kind of public good for the community of Fraser. So the staff recommendation would be a motion to approve both the adoption of the proposed Fraser Economic Development Incentives Program, which would provide an open invitation to commercial developers and business owners looking to build commercial real estate or open new businesses, to seek economic incentives, which would be considered for approval at the sole discretion of the Board of Trustees, as has been outlined here and in the staff briefing, and adoption of the suggested updates to the Fraser Business Enhancement Grant Program. Any questions?
I have a couple of questions. So there's really three funding mechanisms with the tax rebate, which we could decide the percentage and for how long. Number two would be the payment of water and wastewater fees over a period of time, 2 years, whatever.
Those would be deferred over, that one's a little more set. If somebody, if that's of a benefit to somebody, it would be set over 2 years. So they're not paying any less. It just allows them more time to pay
it
it.
over.
So they don't have that
installments.
large upfront cost.
Yeah.
It'd be over 2 years.
And then the enhancement grants. So I guess my question is, maximum award of 25,000, is that 25,000 per business or is that 25,000 total?
That would be per business.
So how much do we?
Presently in years past,
Budgeted for
yeah.
this?
In past years, we budgeted 75,000 per year. If we did up the award when this comes up during budget discussions, I would recommend maybe looking at 100,000, which would allow up to 4 maximum awards. We might still have requests for smaller awards. But again, I think the idea is that it's just gotten so expensive to do most things that if we really want to see a difference in, how businesses are presenting themselves and, streetscapes and things like that, that it may take some cash to do that.
And how much have we spent of the 75? I'm sorry, one more. How much have we spent of the 75,000 for this year?
Let's see.
I'm not sure if we've done any.
What was that?
Exceeded
The
30
Fraser-
grand to the
Fraser
DDA.
River Brewing did
Fraser River
there.
Company has a pad.
Yeah.
We don't.
Oh,
Yeah, it's definitely been underutilized and we have not spent the full 75,000. We've tapped into it for different things that needed to be funded that were related. This past year though, the Fraser River Brewing Company got an award for their patio. What is it called?
Did those,
Fraser.
did those items have to come before the board or does the staff make those decisions? Because I don't remember that.
No, in the past, it's been the way the program was structured, it was administratively approved if they met the criteria.
And the max request was $7,500. So we can, we can have all these to come to the board for final approval. You could have, if you wanted some of the smaller requests under 7,500 to be still as long as they're meeting the criteria for the 50% match. And it fits in alignment with our program. We can still have administrative approval if you want to. Otherwise, it could just be the larger request that comes to the board from an applicant, or you guys can have it all. It's up to you.
And some of the idea of having a singular deadline is that it can be promoted and you can get all those applications at once and that it'd be easier for the board to review. Previously with the smaller grant request, a lot of times businesses present them when they're ready to do their project tomorrow. And so having it go through the board and honestly, I wasn't around when this was originally drafted, but the decision was made to just have it be administrative, which has been a pretty quick, expedient process.
Yeah, I'm okay setting a dollar threshold and below that, have the staff approve it as meet criteria. But if it's a $25,000 grant, I'd kind of like to know about it.
Yeah, and that's why it's suggested that it come in front of the board
Okay.
for approval.
I'm sorry, Adam. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that we just seeded 30 grand to it out of this fund, right?
Yes, out of this
To
past
the
year, yeah.
DDA.
Yeah.
Can the DDA as a whole apply for a grant?
Could
this
they?
program?
Oh,
Not an individual
No,
business.
the DDA, yeah, we're not a 501c3, right?
well, I think, are you asking, could they apply for a business enhancement grant?
Yeah.
I think that would be your decision.
Depends on what it is.
I think that would probably be more in alignment with the donor advised funds
Okay.
that we'll have later this year. Similar to what we did last October, I believe. We just sat down with Megan and Amy from the Grant Foundation to go over this year's plan. So we've got that in the works, but we have 65,000 that we budgeted last year for donor advice funds, and that's specifically for nonprofit initiatives and such.
Because our last meeting, we did seed the DDA money out of that fund.
Right.
Which I'm hearing now is not allowed.
Well, just to clarify that, we took it out of that budget line item. It was not considered a business enhancement grant.
Okay.
Because there was money in the budget
So that
there.
line item is
And this was
reduced.
seen as a related economic development.
I'm not for or against. I
Yeah,
just have
no, but just to provide that clarification. And I know when we did the workshop in June, we were listing some businesses and they were like, I've never gotten a business enhancement grant. That was during COVID, businesses got money. And again, that money came out of this fund, or this budget line item, I should say, but it wasn't marketed at the time necessarily, I guess, as a business enhancement grant. So just to clear up that clarification from the June workshop.
So from the discussions we've had about this before, and thank you, Sarah, she's done a lot of work and research on this. You've always had the opportunity for people to come forward and say like, hey, I would like to get on your agenda. We could approve them to be on the agenda for requesting economic incentives. This is again just an invitation and something that we would have reflected on our website that we can market and we can have the Downtown Development Authority help advocate for. One of the big benefits of the Downtown Development Authority is to help really connect the fabric between the business community and resources locally available to the town through other means, and to the DDA itself, because the DDA is going to be having some funds beginning next year that they can use at their discretion following town board approval of their budget. But again, this is just an invitation. I think if you want to set a threshold, if you like the 7,500, we can keep that administrative. Anything above that, we can have come to the board for approval. I think that can work really well. And part of the thought is of the larger amount is just the increases that we've seen on any project that you're doing. I mean, $7,500 doesn't really get you that far anymore.
Well, they have to match it. It'd be
Yeah.
15,000, $15,000 project. right?
For 25,000,
No, I mean, I'm talking,
Yes.
they have to match 50% of whatever.
right? Unless they
Whatever they
provide,
get, they have to match.
unless they argue that it's for a better public benefit, and that can be at the discretion of the board as far as, do you want to approve a lower match based on the public benefit that's coming for the application request? Sarah, can you go back to that?
So give some flexibility.
Yeah.
That's good.
I mean, I guess I'd be a little concerned that we be seen as arbitrary and capricious when we're making these sort of on the fly decisions to grant someone an exception or to, you know, exclude them from some criteria because for whatever reason, I don't know
Well, I
if
mean,
that's a
one
problem
thing
or
is
not, but
they could build a pocket park, and maintain it. And it's a public, it could be a public space. It could be contributed to town. They could build a bus stop, that makes sense on their business. We've been having conversations with Safeway about a more structured, sheltered bus stop at Safeway. They could apply for funds for something like that. There's a public benefit there. I think that'd be great if we could work with them on something like that. But that's just kind of an example of where maybe you would want to lower the match because of the significant public benefit that comes through the request.
is that a problem, Ken?
So the statute's pretty broad. It basically gives a statutory town the ability to negotiate with anybody who's going to bring in a new business facility, and that's defined in the statute, or expand an existing business facility, or to keep somebody from moving out of state from your town. But it doesn't really pin down, do you have to treat this person the same as the person next door that's going to establish a new business facility? It basically says the town has the ability to negotiate these incentive agreements.
Okay, just as long as we don't approve something and then somebody comes
Yeah.
along behind them with pretty much the
My-
same thing, we deny it.
My advice would be if you have two similarly situated business owners with relatively the same type of business facilities they're proposing, you'd want to treat them as equally as possible.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
And that's part of the reason too for adding the layers, asking the DDA board to, as the local downtown development authority business owners to provide some review and recommendation, and then to have it go in front of the board versus having, one staff member decide this business gets it, this business doesn't. And trying to, again, have criteria that we're looking at that can help inform those decisions. So it's not just arbitrary.
So Sarah, is this just limited to the DDA area?
No.
It is not.
It sounds kind of specific to downtown Fraser, which.
I mean, I think it's geared towards downtown Fraser, but there are businesses outside of the DDA and they could apply for these as well. I mean, if you have a business in a back corner out of your garage that nobody ever sees, you're probably not a top contender for this, just given the purpose of the grant is meant to, improve the economic vitality and the beautification, the appearance of Fraser. So it's not to say you couldn't get it, but I mean, that is probably a criteria that would be looked at.
We do have, some commercial space in Rendezvous and in Grand Park.
Yeah, they would be eligible as well to apply for these.
Yeah, and the DDA, I think, is open to businesses outside of their boundaries, and just trying to provide that advocacy for these types of programs to the business community, whether they're in the DDA or not.
And I think that's one of the reasons, at least at this point, to keep this as a town program and ultimately have the authority rest with you and the funds rest with the town. If it was a DDA specific program, they could only fund things within the DDA boundary.
And if there's a recommending board, I would suggest that there would be a business owner or participant from outside of the DDA to.
That would make sense. Yeah, I think we could look at that, bringing somebody, one or two folks in from outside the DDA.
Just for
those
recommendations to avoid that bias.
No, I think that's a great suggestion.
I also, I'm a little bit concerned. I don't disagree with the opportunity to defer payments, but I would like to protect the enterprise fund against a business that does not make it.
if we draw deferred payments for 3 or 4 years or something like that too? Or-
That's
yeah,
why we
yeah.
kept it at 2, yeah.
Okay, I don't know how we back it. Maybe it's general fund, but the enterprise funds need to be whole.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I can talk with
We were just
Kent,
had
see
a
if there's any
workshop. We just had a
suggestions there.
workshop.
Okay.
So some kind of a guarantee that goes along with it.
Yeah,
Why don't you put a
Money
lien?
that's whether the town backs it or somebody else.
Yeah,
I
this
don't
is a
care.
guarantee that,
But the
oh, at the end
utilities
of the
need to
2
do
years
that.
period, it'll be
The
paid for.
enterprise funds.
It would
should
essentially
not
have to
be
become a
supporting
lien on the property.
Yeah, whatever mechanism, I was just.
Okay. Cool.
That makes sense.
And I have a couple of suggestions. For one, on your dates, what about the first Friday in February? FFF. Because,
FFF.
yeah, it might be February 1st, or it could be the 3rd, or it could be, the 7th. But, you're not tied to a date that we're closed on a weekend when nobody can submit, and gives them just a little bit more time.
For
with
the
March.
first Friday. Yeah, and honestly, I was looking at if you do the 3rd, that gives us enough time to process them and have, if the DDA continues with their current schedule, which is to meet the second Tuesday of the month, then they would be able to review those at that board meeting and then have them
So
go to
Friday,
the
Tuesday
board.
would be too tight.
Yeah, I think so.
Gotcha.
It would
Okay.
be. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then third's fine.
If you wanted to be consistent over the years, I think that makes sense. But there was that question of, do we do it a little earlier? Do we push it back to March? At least one of the business owners in the GDA felt like March would be a better deadline for people and hopefully still give people enough time to get permits or do whatever they need to do for that summer months.
Yeah, their point was for the one business owner that kind of talked about that. It's just coming out of the gates after Christmas and New Year's and then January, and then trying to get your ducks in a row for the application. It's just kind of tight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Okay, so we can look at March 3rd.
Yeah, or March 1st, whatever.
Okay.
And that, there'll be a lot of review, but like you said, the 10,000 could be 10,000 below administrative below review and above 10.
I mean,
I think a lower number maybe.
Somebody want to stick with the 750?
I guess my
Okay.
opinion is if we're having a date, then maybe we prioritize maybe the DDA first, prioritize the project by public benefit. Maybe it's only a $2,500 project, but it's a big benefit.
Yeah.
So I would say for the March 3rd deadline, they just review every project.
Mhm.
And then after that, maybe we could do an administrative, 7,500 or 10,000, whatever you guys decide.
Yeah, if we don't
Okay.
spend all the money first go around, then maybe quarterly, we could have a meeting and review whatever's been submitted.
Yeah, we could do it quarterly. Again, I'm trying to be cognizant of people submitting applications and the kind of the short time frame for people to do this. So I think the idea, which we don't have to stick with, was if you have that March 3rd, everything's reviewed. And then if stuff rolls in, it could be 7,500 and under that is qualified, maybe gets approved, and the larger ask would go through that process at the next DDA board meeting and Board of Trustees meeting.
I mean, I think the idea is that we dole out all the money based on that March 3rd application. And if we don't, then whatever's left over, people can apply for.
Right.
Right. Right.
Well, it has to be a good project. We're just not going to spend money on stuff that's not adding value.
Yeah, it's
But
not an
she's got,
automatic.
they all.
Just to spend money.
Everything's outlined, what the mandates are for it, so. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, the deadline would be good for marketing purposes and getting the word out and getting hopefully some good response.
Okay.
All right.
Is there any public comment before we get a vote?
I guess, a couple of things. Clark Lipscomb for the record. One, do you guys have any control over the lodging tax, or is it completely in the county's hands?
It's in the county. I mean, we elected officials can advocate for it, but as a home rule, as a statutory municipality, we're not entitled to a lodging tax like Winter Park is as a home rule.
Okay, so that's off the table. And then I didn't really hear anything, new construction related. of any significant, I mean, you guys have a lot of fees for new construction, building permits, use taxes, et cetera. And, you know, remodeling existing buildings in downtown Fraser, which I think is what you're referring to as this area, is one thing, but building new, large, big facilities in Grand Park or Rendezvous is a whole nother, and it's a whole nother investment level. And I think a little bigger, but I'm thinking in terms of scale and dollar investments and what it can do for the town of Fraser and the community when big investments are made. And there's really not big areas here that you can do these kinds of big investments. And so I'm just curious if y'all thought about new construction at all and fee waivers and things of the like, because similar to what I think was in the original incentive that we had for Market Street, that I think sounds like the position has changed on the terms that were in that. That's great. I'm all for economic incentives, but nonetheless, I'd like to, you know, make sure that we can kind of help encourage some of these bigger investments for things that, you know, sometimes I think there's demand. I always feel like there's always demand. Obviously, you guys know me. I'm always advocating and trying to bring new businesses to town. But sometimes studies show that, well, it, you know, maybe not, right? And it could just be that little bit that gets that big investment over the line, that when we build new buildings, they're here for our lives, right? I mean, it would be unlikely they're going to go away. So they're going to generate revenues for this town for a very long time. And so I'd just like you to consider that and the scale of the investment that someone might be making.
Thanks. Anybody else in the audience, or did you want to?
Sorry, yeah, I can speak to that a little bit, Clark. We have found in working with Kent that we are somewhat limited as a statutory town in what we can offer developers. Sales tax rebates have to go to the business owners. It is possible that a developer who is building something and then leasing space could work out an agreement with a tenant to recoup some of that. However, that might be structured. That is one of the reasons that we did include a line for additional incentives being considered, so that a developer could come and make a request and we could consider those. So the couple that were mentioned are two that we know legally we can do and tend to be common tools. In terms of waiving fees and different things like that, we'd have to look at what's in our code. I think some of what Adam was saying about keeping the different enterprise funds whole, we have to consider as well. But again, we tried to leave room in there that a developer could make their pitch. We'll legally vet, you know, what we're able to offer, and then we'll bring that to the board.
I wasn't thinking necessarily of developers. I was thinking of end users. The Foundry is a good example.
Right.
Right. That's a building that was purpose built by the business owner for that business. And that could happen again and again and again.
Well, interior construction is a thing too, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, just like some of the new commercial spaces in downtown Winter Park here, you know, that's something that could be considered too, how could we help incentivize, you know, helping them with very expensive internal tailorings for their business, especially if you have a lot of heavy equipment and different things coming in. One thing that Kent spoke to, he kind of mentioned, is our ability for business already at their current facility. If they want to expand their business, then we can help them with incentives to help them expand their business legally. And with sales tax, it's based on the increment that they would, for the additional revenues they would bring in from their expansion at their business facility. So that can help with incentivizing existing businesses to maybe add on that additional 1,000-foot addition, or bring in some more seating area or something along those lines. So again, we're kind of limited to what we can do legally as a home rule. I know we're going to be having some conversations about home rule and looking at what we could do going that route. And these conversations will obviously be a part of that. But we're kind of limited as far as what we can do at one time and place right now with staff. But we will be bringing those conversations soon.
And I'll just add that, yeah, so significant expansion could still be seen as new commercial development. But that also we see this as one tool in the toolbox for economic development. So we can continue to build out that toolbox and different offerings. So if we find that there really is a need for interior improvements, making buildings more energy efficient, whatever it may be, this doesn't necessarily have to be or is meant to be the be all end all of Fraser's economic development portfolio.
And we'll
But wanted
continue
to be able to start moving things forward and have some offerings
And
out
we can
there.
continue to vet offerings for like the end user business facility or for like a developer perspective. So we'll continue to build out that catalog. But this is just a good invitation that we can advertise, we can link, have the page on our website, the DDA can take it and run with it kind of thing.
Do we need a motion to approve this or do we
The
have
two
a good
things.
idea of direction from the board?
Yes, so I have a motion to approve for you if you would like to use it.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the adoption of the proposed Fraser Economic Development Incentives Program and adoption of the suggested updates to the Fraser Business Enhancement Grant Program.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Good work. Once again.
Moving on to Public Arts Committee application, Antoinette.
So we did receive an additional application for the Public Arts Committee. Her name is Lorena Stokel. She is eligible. I did put her application in the packet. She does live within the correct rec district boundaries in order to be eligible. And I did put that eligibility to PAC members on there that I didn't put on that last staff briefing since you guys had asked for that the last time. And currently there are 7 members on the PAC. This would move them to 8, and they are allowed to have up to 11 members. And just so you know, I did receive an additional application just this week. I think the chair of the Public Arts Committee is really working hard at trying to staff up the committee. And they would be happy to have additional members.
Awesome. Great.
Any thoughts on the application?
Great.
She looks very qualified.
Thank you, Lorena.
Mhm.
No, but if she's out there and listening, I thank her.
Any questions for me?
I would entertain a motion to approve the application of Lorena Stokel to the Public Arts Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, welcome Lorena. Right. I guess we go to updates first. Anybody have any updates from the board?
I have a couple of things. Yes, so with us at this stage, it's updates, it's new business, right? It's board business? Or should board new business be on a new business?
I would consider updates to be from the board or the staff,
Yeah,
and anything that's not on the agenda.
gotcha. Anything on non-agenda from board or staff, okay. So, it was interesting on taxing nothingness for a very good cause. Patrick Brower's had a good article in the Sky High News on Wednesday, interesting, with some of the potential unintended consequences of the CAS proposal to tax unoccupied units. And if y'all haven't read it, I think it's makes you think a lot harder about supporting that if we're asked to, because we talked about it, but did we actually support CAS with it? Anyway, it's a good article
Yeah, we haven't taken up it yet.
on taxing nothingness for a very good cause.
The only one entity that I know that's taken that is, I believe, Crested Butte tried to implement a dark home fee for homes that were not being occupied and just sitting there, not providing any benefit to the community besides, I guess, property tax. And that failed in Crested Butte, and that sounds like a similar thing. But I'll look into it a little bit and get some information out.
Okay. And then I can say this and share it with staff, but I have a good friend that lives up off of Wapiti, and the renters that come in next door and leaving the trash out, the bins aren't bear proof, and the bear pushes it down the hill and the trash goes everywhere. Looking back to our regs, we do have regulations that talk about how anyway, that are, I don't think a lot of people are familiar with them, or that we enforce them when we get a chance. That all residential containers that receive refuse edible by wildlife must be secured inside the home or garage. And if not, if they're outside, they have to be in wildlife proof containers. And my friend Sheila, who's done a lot of work and has been frustrated with all this, she wrote up an addendum, kind of an educational piece that would be for, that we could get through our short-term rental program to either have the owners post it for their residents to let them know. But anyway, I'll get with staff. I'll show you her comments and we'll see if we can move harder on this.
Okay.
It's that time of the year.
Yeah, Chief, when we get these complaints, it typically requires a police report or a CPW report to actually go and verify that there's trash everywhere. Once one is documented, I believe they're required to get a wildlife proof container. You know how that process is going?
That's correct. And one of the issues we've had is that frequently when we speak to homeowners, they were like, we ordered a wildlife proof container 3 months ago and we're still waiting for it. And so that's a challenge, but I would say just anecdotally, this has been the worst year I've seen in a long time for bears. I mean, they are all over. I got up 2 weeks ago and there was trash all over my front yard, and I live in Granby by the high school. So it's a tough year. We have made a lot of contacts and make contacts every day, but it has been very difficult for everybody involved in this.
You know, and there's some relatively easy ways to retrofit your trash bin. You know, by drilling a hole and attaching a clasp and putting a carabiner in it, something like that. The bears, if they really want it, they're going to sit on it, stomp on it, and smush them. But at least if they push it over, it doesn't go anywhere. So I don't know. In the future, I think that we need to work a little harder on educating.
I mean, it could be something that we could put in as far as materials that go with the short-term rental registration. We can inform them about the drop and how the drop works.
Yep,
and additionally, if trash company, waste management, Ranch Creek, if they're good with people drilling holes to their containers and such, maybe we kind of get some buy-in from them as well as far as what homeowners could do. I don't know. It's
Something
their
simple.
property that they'll collect back, but I would assume that as long as it's just simple something,
Yeah.
they can be bought at Murdoch's if they'll be okay with it.
So should I give this to you or?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give this to you. I can email you a copy too, because she addresses that.
Thanks.
Great.
You know, ironically,
Drop.
the business enhancement grant, the first reason for creating that was signage. The second reason was for bear-proof enclosures, because we passed an ordinance requiring commercial entities to have those enclosures. So that was the first expansion of the business enhancement grant, was to go from signage to include. Well, we didn't get very many. Not many applied for it.
$100 on Uline.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I got.
Trash can that's bear-proof.
I want to remind everybody, the film festival is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I hope you all will join us. Got some great films. So hope to see everybody there.
Got sitters for Friday and Sunday.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Updates?
I don't really have an update. I guess I'll be requesting an update about those brush piles up by the railroad tracks. There's nothing happened and they're still there, and that's, I'm wondering what the status of that is, because we were pushing hard to get somebody to respond to, and I don't know what happened to to that. The other thing is the Market Street buildings. Nothing really has happened. There's a little bit more styrofoam at the top. But across from me, there's 3 new houses and there's 4 new condo buildings that have gone up this summer. So I don't know what's going on. Be slow walking it or intentionally because of the lawsuit or what's going on, but they haven't made any progress with that. So should we start thinking about, applying more pressure to get that done? Because it's really, as you've seen, there's a little bit of new white styrofoam up, but that's basically it that I can see.
We were actually talking about that earlier today with staff, and our project manager, Brad Rowe, who does kind of daily trips around town and looking at various projects going on. He's been seeing smaller crews, 10 to 15 people. They're working at a time in the early mornings at different times. I've been seeing people a lot working on the interior work, but not seeing the larger production crews there on site. The biggest leverage the town, or really the only leverage I think the town has, is going to be through the building permit. So he has until October of next year,
2025.
it was 2025, right? To close out his building permit. Otherwise, if he doesn't get to that point, he goes to request it. I think something that we could help with is just like, hey, like we provide the time, we did not see the substantial completion that was kind of promised to the town. And we could be looking at just bringing back the fees for extending that building permit. That's something that we could be entitled to, and it's a significant fee.
I just find it ironic that he's asking for more commercial space and he's got that right here. He could finish it. I don't know if the approval of what we talked about earlier, this, whatever, the Village of Grand Park filing is.
As a developer, they're looking for entitlements. They're trying to get the property entitled to increase the value of the property. I think that's ultimately what they're going for.
Anyway,
But-
it's still an eyesore. The hospital looks like it's gone up to their
going pretty quick.
second floor and
Yep.
getting built out pretty quickly.
Do we need any ordinances, any mechanisms that we don't have currently to avoid situations like this or to take control of these situations in the future?
We have a health department.
We do. I can do some research on as far as what we can look at for other enforcement with this while it has an active building permit.
And it doesn't, even if it doesn't apply to that, we want to avoid this situation in the future. I remember the James Peak Lodge situation in their park. It's never pretty for anybody. It makes us look bad. It makes him look bad. And if there's mechanisms out there, tools out there that we should have in place, maybe we should look into that.
So there is an alternative that we nearly took that I can send out to the board. It's a discretionary document, but I can send that out to you, and it's something that we can exercise that would be good. It's going to answer your questions for you, but I don't want to put it on a public record.
I appreciate that. I almost didn't ask.
I had a neighbor mention that he's watching dump trucks and poofs of smoke or dirt or something
Yeah.
going on through it way back in
Mhm.
Grand Park. And I just was wondering if anybody knew what they were doing or,
There's a lot of construction going on, but it's not going on in the Market Street buildings. I know that.
well, this is like way at the top on the other.
Oh, I
side
know,
of the
they have a
railroad.
big dirt pile and they're moving dirt down by the Sydney
So-
Hills, I think.
They've got the concrete plant going and they brought in a big load of concrete. The other morning, it made a huge white cloud. Huge.
Yeah, but this is like
But
at the
I
top
can
of
see that.
Rendezvous, or at the top of Grand Park, not
Okay.
over by the Tubing Hill. This
Okay.
is way.
Oh, no, they're
That's
busy working.
West Mountain, very top.
They're busy working. Okay.
All right.
Government drone.
I have an update.
Hold on. You also asked about
Good, I'm glad you're back.
the piles up
Yeah.
in Fraser.
Oh, yeah. the crush pile.
So I actually spoke with Chief White, who is the president of the Wildfire Council. He's also the Granby Fire Chief.
Mhm.
And talked to him from his position with the Wildfire Council as far as addressing those piles of wood. We're reaching out to Amtrak this week and trying and giving them till Friday to give us any kind of response. Otherwise, Chief White feels comfortable with providing them with a letter saying that we are going to kind of rework your wood piles there and to burn them once the snow flies.
Oh, God. There's a huge one right by the condos.
They'll restructure this.
Restructure.
They're gonna move on,
Yeah.
restructure
Move it.
them,
Big.
put them in good spots.
Okay.
And it's gonna cause smoke, whichever the wind's blowing, so it's gonna bother, but after that, they'll be gone.
Yeah.
So we're laying that out and we're trying to give them a chance to say, no, we're not okay with that, or they are okay with it. Otherwise, we're gonna provide them the letter that we're doing it. If you have an issue with it, let us know. And we're offering some staff labor and equipment support, and maybe a small financial support to get it done. So that call was with Chief White this week.
Cool.
Okay. Actually,
Thank you.
Sarah?
Thank you. I wanted to provide a couple DDA updates and plan of development updates. Real quick, I'll show you, they did adopt a logo, which should look familiar. So that is their Downtown Development Authority logo. They worked within our brand identity guidelines, and Nick from Camber there put that together. We had a meeting with the county assessor and she's provided preliminary numbers for increment. So if we get a plan of development adopted in time and notify them that we are eligible to start collecting tax increment, they have requested November 15th as that deadline. The DDA stands to get 65,000 from this year. And so that's from largely new construction that went online this past year. So that's a nice pot of money. They get that every year moving forward if they get it this year. So I think it is crucial to try to make this happen. That number could change between now and December based on a number of different things. So that's just a preliminary assessment. It gives us something to start thinking about and working with as they try to prioritize and put together a budget, which hopefully will be brought in front of you probably either late October or late November for approval. The statute does require you to approve their budget. The plan of development process is happening with Ayers Associates next week. So that'll be Monday through Wednesday. Monday morning, there's a stakeholder kickoff meeting that you're all invited to attend if you're available and would like to participate. So that'll be from 9 to 10:30 at Town Hall. And then Wednesday, there will be another meeting from 9 to 10:30 for key downtown stakeholders. And that is when they will be presenting a plan of development or draft for discussion and we can provide feedback with. So from that time on, we're going to be moving pretty quickly to try to review that, provide edits, and get it in front of the Planning Commission on September 25th. Statute requires or states that they have 30 days to provide written recommendations. We're hoping that they will evaluate it at their meeting and provide those recommendations at that time so that we could ideally have a public hearing for the plan of development on October 16th. Again, as part of this process, we'd like as much input as possible from trustees. So I did send out a link. If folks are interested in meeting individually with the DDA, I'm hoping to finalize that schedule tomorrow. So you can let me know now if you're interested what your general availability is and I'll slot you, or if you could fill that out either tonight or tomorrow morning. But I think it'd be great to have, 3-4 trustees kind of involved in that process, hopefully attending those 2 meetings if you are available, and then meeting with Ayers. So we're going to be doing individual stakeholder meetings Monday afternoon.
Is there on our website that we have those meeting times when people can provide feedback?
They should be on our website. I don't answer that, ask for that. So we'll work on getting that up first thing tomorrow. But I sent out emails to all of our business owners and some different stakeholder entities. They will be public meetings on Monday and Wednesday, but ideally they're not meetings with 100 people. should mention ears will also be at breweries Monday and Tuesday evenings. So Monday night, they'll be at Fraser River Beer Company from 5:15 to 6:30. And then they'll be at Camber on Tuesday at the same time. So those are just
We'll
open
send it
drop-in
out. We'll
sessions.
send it out to the board. I can-
I sent an email with it
Oh,
on
you did?
yesterday.
Okay,
You should have those dates.
gotcha.
I will say the DDA page has a general outline of what the plan of development timeline looks like. But I will get more of those specifics for next week as to when and where the public can interact.
And we will be publishing those sessions as public meetings as DDA, I believe DDA workshops, with a mention that 3 or more board of trustee members as well as planning commissioners may attend.
Are those meetings going to be online?
Yes, yeah, well, yeah,
At least the ones here.
if they're here. they're not here.
So the Monday at 9:30.
The Monday and the Wednesday will be, we'll work on publishing those tomorrow, so they'll have, I think, a regular board meeting link that people can use to attend virtually.
Cool, thank you.
Yep.
Is anything going on Thursday? Or is it done?
It'll be done on Thursday.
Perfect.
The DDA board, we're still figuring out, they're gonna have to meet, I think, to formally adopt the plan of development before we get to the planning commission.
Right.
And then working on when that means.
Okay.
Any other updates?
Yeah, I have a couple for you guys.
Okay.
First off, paving. So starting midweek next week, ESI will be here in coordination with Winter Park to do milling and paving. So we will be, Town of Fraser is going to be milling and paving all of South Wapiti from the stoplight to the dead end, all of Quail from the intersection with County Road 8 and to the dead end. We'll be doing Fraser Avenue from Highway 40 to Railroad from where we put the patch on the sewer project last summer to Eisenhower, and then Mill Avenue from Norgren all the way down and then come around to Byers this year. Should be in the
I'll
next,
come
start at
come
Norgren,
around on Leonard.
come around on Leonard to Byers. So
Awesome.
where we stop paving for the project.
Yeah.
Take that around, try and clean up all those potholes and also try to address the groundwater that's coming out of the two valve boxes should be addressed hopefully Tuesday and Wednesday next week. Put in a French drain under there before they pave it.
Great.
Crosswalk beacons miraculously showed up the
Sweet.
next day after board meeting last month. They just randomly showed up and asked me to take delivery of our crosswalk beacons. So street staff's going to work on getting that done before ski season starts. That's our goal, is to get those up. So as people are trying to cross in those crosswalks, the beacons will be up. If you get a chance, over here at Old Town Park, we have the new drinking fountain installed. So it's actually installed and functioning as of yesterday. So we have that in there. And then the sidewalk project, with the delays with survey and getting everything done this spring, we should have that RFP hopefully published in the next 2 weeks to get that ready, either possibly get somebody this fall, but we missed out on the joint effort with Winter Park since we hadn't partnered with them in several years. They weren't expecting us to partner with them this year. So they already have their work started, but we will be doing the sidewalk on Norgren, Eisenhower. We'll be doing the missing sidewalk in front of Fraser River Beer Company. We'll be repairing the curb and gutter and any sidewalk in front of Camber that's really bad. And then over between the rec center and the Shell station, all of those parking areas, all of that destroyed curbing in there, be the first phase of starting with that section. And there's a lot of curbing that's been destroyed over the 20 years in that first section there of Grand Park that
Great.
needs service. So that's the plan going forward with those.
So curious, on Norgren and Eisenhower, which side of the street?
North of Eisenhower and east on Norgren.
Wait, or just opposite? No, wait, you got it. East on Norgren, okay?
Yeah, so to tie in right with the crosswalk and then,
Yeah, because I know originally you talked about the other side, but it.
yeah, we're going
the
to
way
tie
it
it.
works out.
It's going to work out on this side
Sure.
and then on the north side of Eisenhower to take advantage of as much sun as we can.
Okay, wonderful.
And then we're also looking into some share the road type signage for Old Town, which would be, for cars, bikes, and pedestrians, since we don't have sidewalks and everybody is commuting or being mobile in the same space. Looking at some options there that have brought forth by Andy Miller, who'd seen some things as he toured the world. So finding ones that are
Great.
applicable for the United States. So seeing what we can do.
Paul, question.
Yes.
I heard we had resolution to how the West Mountain Green Zone will be served. We approved that development.
We do
And
not
that-
have, so we just have the construction documents for the layout for the piping.
Mhm.
Everybody's in agreement on. We do not have tank or pump design yet. They are working on it.
I heard we were getting a tank.
So there will be a green zone tank. So the only tank that the town is on the hook for is a second blue zone tank. All the other tanks would be the
I was
developers.
specifically talking about the green zone because that latest, the planning area.
Yeah, so there'll be a
expands
green
into
zone.
The green zone.
Yeah, so
and
there'll be a green
things like that
zone
to
and
staff.
then, so to start, there'll just be a booster pump from the yellow zone to the green zone. And then they'll get the tanks, because I think there's only like 3 houses in that upper zone in the first filing. But yeah, we're working on it. Should be 3 tanks with 4 boosters to get up into the purple zone. I think I have one more. I just thought of it. The stormwater project. Adam Roth, the stormwater intern, is making much better time than we anticipated. So we're actually going to get a lot more out of this project than originally anticipated. They've mapped almost all the outfalls into the Fraser River, but they've also mapped all flows in Old Town so far. And they're working in Rendezvous and just mapping all the stormwater that they can through this project. So it's working out very well.
Are photos from storm events and water drainage of use? So I know I have some from behind Murdoch's where it runs into Elk Creek, and then Clark actually has a lot of photos.
I mean, we can add them. This is more yeah, if you have them, I can get
Only if
to,
they're useful.
we can upload them. We're creating a dashboard that the public will be able to see when we're done.
Okay.
That kind of shows where those outfalls are, what they look like, but
Okay.
yeah. If you want to forward them
And
to
that's
me.
called outfalls where the water goes into
Into the
river
Fraser.
creek. Okay. Okay. Cool.
Are we ready? Might I suggest a 5-minute break before we go into this, but yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you all.
I move to enter into 2 executive sessions. Executive session number 1 for a conference with town attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions under CRS section 24-6-402 4B. For the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and or instructing negotiators under CRS section 24-6-402 4E regarding litigation, to include town attorney Kit Whitmer and town manager Michael Brock. Executive session number 2 for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and or instructing negotiators under CRS section 24-6-402 4E, MAD development, to include town manager Michael Brock and assistant town manager Sarah Catanzarite.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,
Kent?
5 minutes and we'll start.
Did you want to say your?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
thanks for reminding
For any
me.
public online.
It's my
we will not be
opinion
returning
that
to
everything that'll
secretary.
be discussed in the first executive session will be attorney-client privilege, does not need to be recorded.
Correct.
Okay.
And
And
after
we will
the,
not be returning. We will just, adjourn the meeting at the end of these executive sessions. Thanks.
Good.